everyone, it is Karen. I just got home from work and I want to talk to you today about the book that I have mentioned previously, The Art of Libromancy by Josh Cook. So Josh Cook is an independent bookseller. He owns Porter Square Books, which is in Cambridge and also has a Boston location. I went to the Cambridge location a few years ago. And I initially heard about this book from Sarah's channel. Her channel is called Eyes on Indie, and she has devoted her entire channel to just promoting indie books. And so this book obviously deeply impacted her because of the whole premise of her channel. And after hearing her talk about it, I was driven to pick it up. And I hope that after this review, you will want to pick it up as well. I've condensed my notes to only 2 pages, so we will see about this. So as I said, Josh Cook is an independent bookseller, and his whole premise on why he wanted to write this book was just to educate people to be better consumers of books, both in what you decide to read, where you decide to buy it from, like all those sorts of things. And so to directly quote one of the first lines in his book, if books are important to you because you're a reader or a writer, then how books are sold should be important to you as well. And that is just the foundation for this entire book. He feels that after reading this book, you'll be a better bookstore customer and also a better reader, and that you'll be able to dip your toe into this conversation, and you'll have a better understanding of everything that goes on behind the scenes in a bookstore. Some of the things I want to talk about in this video are basically 1, why you should buy indie, 2, more reasons why Amazon is the devil, 3, a brief mention about TBRs, because I know we're always trying to make our TBRs super short. And then finally, I want to chat a little bit about the BookTube community, because I feel like that is discussed indirectly in the book. And then after I kind of cover the book, I want to talk about how my goals for 2024 have developed based on reading this book. So first of all, let's talk about buying indie. Everyone knows that it's good to shop at independent bookstores, and it's good to read or buy books from independent publishers, but I learned so much more about this after reading this book. So there's a lot of times on BookTube personally where I want to read what other people are reading. Either my friends have read a book and raved about it, or it's just like you want to do a buddy reader. You want to be able to share your reading with other people because you've read it and loved it, or you see someone else read it and love it, and you really are drawn to having conversations about books. Because if you only read completely uniquely, you would have no one to share with, and that would be lonely and isolating. So everyone is kind of drawn to these conversations. However, we're having the same conversations over and over again. So there's been some research on book publishers and the books that are created. And there was this publisher, Lee and Low, who looked into diversity in children's books. And they discovered that 32% would qualify as diverse in 2017. However, they felt that 42% of America is diverse. And so there's this discrepancy between who is seen in books and who is actually seen in the population of American cities. Only 29% of books that had a Black character as the main character were written by Black writers. So we don't have enough own voices being published. 76% of people working in the publishing industry are white. And it's this self-reinforcing cycle where white people go into publishing and then they support white writers, and white publishers publish the white writers, and the books of white writers sell well, so then they buy more books by white writers, and then because the white writers sell well and are talked about a lot, then we readers buy these books, the books that win these prizes and all that sort of stuff. And it's just this endless cycle of kind of like the rich getting richer, the white writers becoming more and more famous. There is this call for more diversity in literature. And I feel that many of us on BookTube are trying to read more diversely. If you are a regular reader in the world that's not obsessed or super into researching what you're going to read, and you come across a book by a Black writer, it's probably one of a few books by Black writers that are really endorsed. So we all know about our Instagram darlings, I think is what Dee Dee calls them, and the books by Black authors that we hear about over and over and over again, and the ones that are made into TV shows or series or whatever. There are so many other quality Black voices that we don't hear about because the publishers, in order to be diverse, pick like a few, and those are the ones they're going to promote, and all the other Black authors don't have their voices heard or elevated to the extent that they should be, in addition. So there's a whole race issue, right? Okay, let's move a little bit beyond that and go into the publishing industry, which basically has 5 major publishers, right? So each of those 5 major publishers has to reach a broad range of people. And so each of them has like an ultra conservative, white supremacist sort of like imprint that they have for, you know, the people that are into that sort of thing. So even if you buy a book by one of those publishers, you are basically inadvertently supporting white supremacy. So I'm not saying don't buy books by those publishers, because there's so many amazing books that are published by them, but possibly consider tipping your reading in the direction of supporting indie publishers, or just buying more indie books than you did previously, or asking your libraries to order more indie books, because you're going to be supporting a lot of good things and elevating voices of people that aren't as clearly heard or as easily heard, I guess. Josh Cook says, when you do nothing to change the direction of things, you endorse the direction of things. And so when you think about spending money in this coming year or the rest of this year, reflect on, can I do more than one thing with this act? So think about your book buying money that you have. What can you do with it to make an impact on publishing, or maybe just like a drop in the pond? Like, what can you do? And this is probably what I think is the most powerful quote of the entire book. If we want to be allies to anti-racism, we need to factor the thumb on the scale into our buying decisions. We need to buy fewer stacks of already popular, already well-supported, already privileged white writers, and more books by everyone else. Let's move on to Amazon. So I've already read a book on Amazon, which I think was called like How to Quit Amazon or something. And it made me definitely decrease my money that I spend on Amazon. However, I have not broken up completely. We are separated, not divorced. But this book just really provided even more examples on why Amazon is horrible. So I'm going to review some of them that were prior knowledge for me, and maybe they were prior knowledge for you. But I didn't know all about this. So prices for books are set by the publisher. You'll notice that on the back of every book, there's the barcode and the price. And so if you go to a independent bookstore, that's the price you're going to pay, is the price that is on the book. However, obviously the bookstores need to make a profit, and so they buy them at a slightly cheaper price, slightly cheaper. They usually buy them for between 45 and 60% of the sticker price. And so they have narrow margins that they don't really have control over, because, you know, they're kind of stuck with what they sell it at, I suppose, unless they want to give it to you at a bargain, but then their margin would be even smaller. And basically the reason behind this is that it was like decided a long time ago that any unsold books could be sold back to the publisher. And so it's some sort of a weird agreement that this is why the price of books is like set for everybody. And so Amazon comes in and they sell books at a loss. So they're losing money on every book they sell. And that is because then you will become like addicted to Amazon and you will support or buy all their other sort of things like Amazon Prime. And, you know, they own so many other companies now. And yeah, they just have taken over the world. And so it doesn't matter that they lose money on books because they're making so much money on everything else. And the book that I was just talking about how to quit Amazon, shared like horrible stories of really dangerous situations that Amazon workers have been put in. But this one shared another one that I thought was equally, if not more horrible. And it was essentially that while Amazon workers were at work, there was a tornado warning. And instead of finding shelter, or you probably wouldn't want to go home, but finding shelter, they were required to keep working. The workers were. And so it's like, okay, you can go against what your boss says. And, you know, probably I've been in tornado warnings a million times. I've never gotten hit by a tornado, knock on wood somewhere. Or, you know, you could find shelter. So your choices are to keep working and probably not get hit by a tornado, or forget what your bosses say, take shelter anyway because your life is important and you might die. So what happened is the tornado did hit the Amazon warehouse and 6 people were killed. And then I think other people were injured and stuff like that. And this is because Amazon required them to keep working rather than seeking shelter. Okay? So when you're shopping at Amazon, not only are you destroying, you know, the livelihood of other bookstores, but you're also really damaging the lives of other people who are in conditions that are not okay to work in. Moving on, I just have a very brief thing I want to talk about having long TBRs. So for me personally, sometimes I get overwhelmed with the number of unread books that I have on my shelves, and I want to appreciate what I have rather than hoarding books. And every year, especially this time of year, I do feel this need to like gather up books for winter to like sustain me over the long winter months and the snow that is Michigan and possible snow days and stuff like that. And yet I know that I could live in my apartment for years and not finish all my books. At the same time, there is a beauty and a privilege of being able to afford all those books, or to gather them in whatever way that you collect books. It might not be buying them necessarily all the time. And Josh Cook kind of fights against this idea of us constantly trying to reduce our TBRs by saying, I think it's beautiful that I could read books forever and forever encounter the unfamiliar. And so even though I have some goals that I'll talk about in a second about reading what I own, I feel that his words kind of put a positive spin on having a lot of books and just the joys of reading in general, whether that's getting your books from the library or whatever, just forever being able to encounter the unfamiliar. And finally, the last thing I want to share about this book is just this beautiful story that Josh told. So he got engaged, and when they were planning their honeymoon, they ended up deciding they were going to go to Australia and New Zealand. And so basically they were trying to save money because I think someone else was paying for their trip. And so they were trying to just like communicate with friends they already had there, or like people that they knew basically from the internet, and just try and figure out like the inside scoop on where they could stay and stuff like that. And this other bookseller in New Zealand, who Josh knew like only from the internet, ended up allowing him and his new wife to stay with them at their place. And what he said about it was basically that they like spent time together, and sometimes they did stuff together and sometimes they did their own thing. But he said Oddly, we didn't talk about book selling all that much while we were in New Zealand. It felt more like picking up a conversation we hadn't quite finished the last time we hung out, even though we had never hung out before. And I felt so connected to that statement when I went to the UK this summer and I hung out with Sarah and Heather and Bert and Sean. That is exactly what it felt like. It felt like I had known them and we had been friends and we were just picking up from where we left off. And we did do bookish things. I think I went to a bookstore with everyone except for Sean. And we did talk about books, but the majority of the time we were not doing bookish things. And yet we had this deep and beautiful friendship that just seemed so normal. And so I think that is a beautiful thing about the people on here, is that you can form truly genuine, beautiful friendships with people that you've never met in real life, and yet you know them and are friends with them. And so I'm excited to see who else I can meet in 2024 and how my friendships with people can grow. That is all I have to say on this book. I'm curious if anyone would like to read it now, and or if you have other books similar to this that you would recommend, because I felt like this was so incredible and has changed me or is about to change me. So with that being said, let's get into my goals. First, I have a bullet journal page for it, but I want to read 100 books from my own collection next year. So that's not saying I'm not going to buy books. That's not saying I have to read 100 first, anything like that. It's just saying I want to conquer 100 of the books I already own. Okay, that's that. Next, I really want to embrace this idea of, when you think of spending money, reflect on, can I do more than one thing with this act? Time out. I'm going to link Charlotte's Instagram below. She has been doing an amazing job of this anti-advent calendar situation, where each day she talks about a way that you can spend money differently, or at least that's what her focus has been so far, and how you can make small changes to make the world a better place. So I want to focus more on buying mostly from indie booksellers. Not all the time, because I'm not perfect. I want to focus on trying to buy more diversely. So if there's a book, for example, that we're reading from for Dee Dee's book club, that's going to be a book that I'd buy, because often they're quite hard to find because we read diversely in that group. But also they're books that I want to own because they are diverse. They are written by people from the African diaspora. And in that way, I'm supporting typically lesser known Black writers, but also other groups that are considered minorities as well, or that just don't have their voices heard as much. And then what else? Oh, indie publishers. How can I kind of add more of those to what I read this year too? Because quite often their books are incredible. Like, I would be curious actually this year, if I look at my top 10, which I have not developed yet, how many would be, by indie publishers or translated, or I just feel like usually those are the ones that stick with me the most, that I find the most powerful. So nothing specific in regards to spending money differently, but just kind of keeping those ideas in my mind while I'm spending money, and just thinking about how I can do more than one act. And then finally, and kind of connected to that, just kind of crowding out, I guess, white writers. But just that it's kind of like when you are trying to go vegetarian, quite often there is a recommendation to like crowd out like meat or something. Or if you're just trying to eat more healthy, there's this idea of like crowding out the bad stuff by putting more good stuff on your plate. And that's kind of, I guess, how I'm approaching reading this next year, is how can I just read more of everything else and less of white writers? So yeah, again, not anything measurable, just something I want to keep in mind. So with that being said, I'm curious if anyone has goals for next year that they want to share. Go ahead and put them below or make a video response, whatever. I don't care. I just want to hear your life, your goals, all the things. I'm going to eat dinner now, but yeah, let me know your thoughts on this book and I will see you guys soon. Bye.